Right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this live event today, which is emotional well-being. So, emotional well-being refers to the emotional quality and individual experiences. Emotional well-being is influenced by a variety of demographic, economic, situational factors. So, for example, the onset of COVID-19 outbreak lowered the emotional well-being by 74%. And COVID-19 has placed a higher emphasis on mental health and well-being. And companies who are adapting have realized that focusing on employee well-being is a key factor in navigating crisis. And your organization, Axiata Digital Labs, strongly believes in just that. So this event is brought to you by Axiata Digital Labs for being part of Southeast Asia's most innovative digital telco committed to rewriting the rules of digital transformation. Amongst the many awards that I know ADL has won, it is also the first company in Sri Lanka to be appraised at CMMI 2.0 level 3. Well, joining us today to take us through emotional well-being is Mansi Tolakia. She's the CEO of Global Mental Health Association in the USA. She's CEO of Indian Wellness Association and advisor to mental health change in the UK. Just a little bit about Mansi. She is certified in psychology from the University of Cambridge, a published author, and a passionate mental health advocate from London, UK. She holds more than 15 years of experience in mental health domain, having worked internationally to raise mental health awareness. She's also an international motivational speaker and a poet. Her podcast on positive psychology has gained her huge popularity globally. She is published as Powerhouse Global Woman in 2020 by the Powerhouse Global magazine. She has received the prestigious Queen Elizabeth Award for contribution to the UK public health domain. And very recently, she has won the World Peace Ambassador. She's been nominated as World Peace Ambassador by EQ for Peace in the United States of America. Well, I am your host, Anton Thayalan, the Chief Evangelist for Preliminary Learning Solutions, facilitating this discussion. A quick reminder to everyone who's joined us today, feel free to text us your questions, your comments, concerns, either on our chat option via MS Teams or on the numbers that you see on the screen now. On that note, I'm going to introduce and I'm going to welcome Mansi. Hi, Mansi. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Anton. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction as well.
So, Mansi, you are talking to Axiata Digital Labs, and my pleasure to hand over the stage to you, please.
Thank you
All
so
yours.
much, Anton. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So let me begin by sharing my presentation here first. Okay, just to double check, Anton, let me know when you can see it. Okay, then I can begin.
Yep, all yours, Mansi.
Yeah, okay, great. So thank you, Axiata, for having me here today. It's a pleasure. Emotional resilience and emotional intelligence is something that I'm very passionate talking about. Corporate well-being and corporate cultures can incorporate emotional resilience, into companies for employees' well-being, as well as it benefits the organizations in certain ways as well. That is what briefly I'm going to talk about today. So let me present building emotional resilience. Firstly, let's have a look at what is emotional resilience and why is it important. Emotional resilience is your ability to adapt to stressful situations and cope with life's ups and downs. Resilience does not eliminate stress or erase life's difficulties. but it allows you to tackle or accept problems, live through adversity, and move on with life. Now, there are 5 basic pillars of resilience. The first one is self-awareness. Gary Yuko, who was a prominent researcher in leadership, he agrees and he goes on to say that self-awareness makes it very easier to understand a person's own needs and likely reactions if certain events occurred, thereby facilitating evaluation of alternative solutions. For emotional intelligence to be effective, it has to start with yourself. That's why the first point there is self-awareness. The second one is mindfulness. We all know the benefits that mindfulness offers to us to pause, to reflect, to move on. Mindfulness is a part of our day to day life. Third one is self care. Self care is very important because if you don't look after yourself, there is limited amount that you can offer to your company or organization or even to your personal lives. The fourth one is building positive relationships. I'm going to talk about this a little bit further on in the presentation. The last one is purpose. Let's move on to see tips to cope with your work from home situation. COVID presenting itself suddenly during this year brought with it a huge number of challenges for the working class. Now, the typical work from home situation has become extremely tough to cope with for some people. Apart from the network issues that we have, apart from the day-to-day meetings that we have to keep up, there are a lot of things which have presented itself as challenges. And I think in this situation, so here I've come up with some quick tips for you to follow in your day-to-day routine when you're working from home. The basic challenge for me personally to share was I did not know where to stop. So there is no pause during the day because if you're working from your office, then you work from 9 to 5, you work from 9 to 6, you have your lunch break at 1, you have your tea break at 10 in the morning. There are breaks. Whereas if you're working from your home, it's very difficult to schedule those breaks. So I've come up here with a few tips. The first one is self-compassion. Have compassion for yourself. Do only how much you can. I know that the pressures are immense currently because of the workload, because of the situation that the pandemic has presented. But I think that is the first thing to begin with, to have self-compassion. The second one is to maintain a routine as much as possible. Make sure you take your breaks, but make sure when you get up in the morning, you get up at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever your routine is in everyday life, you follow that because otherwise it becomes difficult for you to cope with the new situation. Third one, nourish your body through nutritious diet and practice mindfulness. Shift your expectations. So basically, if you're expecting that, there is a certain amount of workload during the day that you can cope with, but realistically think about it, break it down and schedule yourselves a calendar that how much can you do in what amount of time. So shift your expectation. I think earlier on, if sitting in the office, you were able to concentrate more and you were able to deliver more. But now sitting at home, if you are able to focus late, or if you have situations around the house where there are children, where there are families to look after, so it becomes a bit difficult. So shift your expectations. Connect more with yourself. Device-free time and nature walks, these both are my favorites. I think a little device-free time is needed during the day so that your mind can restart. Nature walks, when you go out for a walk, you're sitting in your chair all day or you're sitting at home all day, and it becomes difficult to do that. So nature walks is another one of my favorite, which I suggest always. Now I've come up with some ways to, support yourself when you feel overwhelmed. The stressfulness at work, the situations, the meetings, the timelines that you have to deliver, the corporate culture is very harsh when it comes to that. And if you don't deliver, then obviously there are going to be questions about it. So I think these are some ways how you can support yourself. The pictures look nice. So when the world feels overwhelming, these are the ways you validate, you control, maintain a routine. Journal is another one of my favorite. I write things down. Writing makes it a lot easier. I have a whiteboard at my place as well, and it's just there in front of me. And it's so much easier to keep track of what is, to be done in the day, because you lose focus sometimes. Declutter. I think in your working space, wherever you're sitting at home, you declutter the space. That helps. Nature. Boundaries. Boundaries is something that I can talk on and on about. That's one of my favorites. So you avoid watching, reading, or listening to news that cause you to feel distressed. All this talk of the pandemic around you all the time, it has affected a lot of us mentally. So have your boundaries. Relax, connect, self-care again, inform, and ask for help. So these are various ways how you can support yourself whenever you're feeling, a bit stressed or overwhelmed. Okay, tips on how to be productive while working from home. So I think organizations and employees both have to work, hand in hand. Now, if a manager is expecting an employee to deliver, then the employee has the responsibility to deliver. How the employee can become more productive while doing this, here are the ways to do that. Stick to a routine, get dressed and out of your PJs. Now, your joggers are okay, pants are okay, but definitely no PJs. You have to get out of them so that you get into that mindset that, you are into your working space now. This is emotional intelligence, where you tell your emotions that even though you are sitting at home, but you have to work. So you get dressed in your office wear, in your clothes, and you sit and work. Create a clean space for working. So like I said, declutter your space, wherever it's your office space, you just make sure that that is your workspace. Write a powerful mantra which drives you to do your best. So for example, I can do this, or I am the best, or whatever drives you, whatever gets that inner drive going. This will help you become productive. You will be more in touch with your emotions in a certain way so that the brain delivers it. Schedule breaks in between. So, for example, if you have meetings from 10 to 12 scheduled, then schedule a half an hour break from 12 to 12:30. And you make sure you eat fruit, you have some juice, or, you have your lunch. Walk outside. So not in your working space. So when I say walk outside, it's, walk outside your house. Walk outside your working space. Don't just walk around in your room. Make a to-do list that is manageable. Set and maintain a start and end time where you leave your workspace. So these are some tips on how to be productive whilst you work from home. I hope this helps you. Okay, so this is my favorite wheel. I have designed this wheel to, make sure that whenever you are navigating through uncertainty, because I think COVID has brought upon some, really uncertain times where you don't know that, what is going to happen in the future, where you don't know that whether you're going to be able to deliver or not. And that is where, this wheel comes into focus. So it's a holistic wheel, which I've developed. So focus on what's in your control. Connect to the people that lift you up. Validate and respond to your feelings. Return to the present moment as an anchor. Choose your information sources wisely. Welcome curiosity and excitement. Accept change and be open to adapt. Do your best with what you have and where you are. All these things will help you connect with your emotions in such a better way. And you will know where to, have your boundaries with people. How much can you do? How much you can't do? So all of that is in there. I love this wheel. I have a picture of it stuck on my wall so that, my focus shifts in the right place from time to time. Right. Let's move ahead. And I'll give you a glimpse of, how emotional intelligence can be integrated into the workplace. So what is the difference between people who have high EQ, people who have, high emotional intelligence in them, whereas compared to people who do not have emotional intelligence in them? So people with high EQ are better at decision making and problem solving because they are better in touch, in tune with their own emotions. So that helps them, with better decision making and problem solving. Whereas the person with low IQ would play the role of a victim or avoid taking responsibility for the error. So for example, if a manager is telling an employee off that you have not done, you have not met your targets, you have not done blah, 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 how the employee with high EQ would respond, and in comparison to how an employee with low EQ will respond. So this is, what it is. This is science. It's, fact-based. The second one is a person with high EQ would keep cool under pressure and resolve conflicts very effectively. Why? If you pause and think why, I think the answer there is because they understand their emotions better. They understand other people's emotions better. So they are able to keep their control on it and respond effectively. If you compare it with a person with low EQ, how would he respond? So he would have passive or aggressive communication styles. He would come up with some kind of aggressive statements that, oh, I'm not responsible for that, or oh, that is not my job, or oh, can't you ask somebody else to do it? So these are the kind of responses you will get from somebody who lacks EQ. Have greater empathy. A person with high emotional intelligence will always have greater empathy. Empathy is such a key skill. It plays a huge role in emotional intelligence. I will go on to empathy in my next slide, and I'll explain a little bit more about it. Now, the person with low EQ would refuse to work as a team because the reason is that the team management skills would not be there. They would not be so strong. Why? The answer to that why is that he is so much into him that he does not realize that how would a team work. He would not be a good team person either. A person with high EQ would listen and reflect and respond to constructive criticism. So, for example, if a colleague is saying to another colleague that, this is something that you have not done properly, or maybe next time you could do this in a better way, and the colleague would respond, with a bit of empathy, understanding that, okay, I will look into that. Whereas the person with low EQ would say that, they would be overly critical of anybody's opinion. They would just dismiss opinions. They would not listen to you. So I think this clearly states or shows what a startling difference there is in a person who has high EQ compared to one who has low EQ. Okay, so why empathy is the most important leadership skill? Richard Wellness, Senior VP of Development Dimensions International, said, being able to listen and respond with empathy is overwhelmingly the one interaction skill that outshines all other skills. Okay, let me just give a quick insight into what empathy actually is. Empathy, in simple terms, means that you would understand other person's pain. You would understand where the other person comes from. You can imagine yourself into other person's shoes and try and think and understand that, what is the problem? Where do they come from? Reasons why empathy is number one leadership skill. Your staff will be more loyal if you are an empathetic leader, Your staff will be more engaged. Your employees will work better with each other. Your staff will be happier. Everyone will be more creative. And this is why empathy is the number one leadership skill and why it is most needed. 5 qualities that emotionally intelligent leaders would possess. People who possess high EI are better able to manage their emotions and the emotions of those around them, giving them tools that allow them to more effectively manage pressure at work. Here, showing you the importance of EI and how it makes you a better leader. Empathy, self-awareness, adaptability, social awareness, and strong authentic communication. These are the 5 qualities that an emotionally intelligent leader would most definitely possess. Now, let's see how EI helps in, coping with workplace pressure. 5 ways how emotionally intelligent people handle workplace pressure in a better way. Stress is inevitable, but these abilities can set you apart when it comes to dealing with interpersonal conflict. They are aware of their own emotions and stress levels. They find trustworthy people to talk to. They take the time to respond rather than reacting. They are able to set boundaries and remain calm in volatile situations. They show their authenticity and vulnerability when appropriate. When a person possesses all of these qualities, obviously it makes them such a better colleague or person or leader or manager to work with. So these are all the qualities that emotional intelligence can actually help you develop. Not everybody is born with, all these qualities, but this is something that we can definitely work upon. This is something that you can develop and possess with training. So closing notes, I'm just going to say that, the basic understanding of emotional intelligence, why emotional intelligence is important, how it helps, how it helps develop a better workplace, how it helps you individually as a person as well. All of those things I've briefly tried to discuss in the presentation there. Apart from that, I would say that I also, offer one-to-one sessions for personal development. Topics for corporate sector would include how to become emotional intelligent leader. Leadership skills and emotional intelligence, they integrate, they go hand in hand. Better leaders obviously possess high amount of EQ, high emotional intelligence in them. Team building skills, how to make your a workplace EI equipped. So I do workshops for workplaces, and where we show you that how you can incorporate EI into your workplace. Increasing communication skills, using EI as a tool for hiring and firing people, and many more. So everything could be customized according to organizational and personal needs. On that note, I would like to close it for today, and I would love to, take any questions in if you guys have any questions. Yeah, so let's take it from there. And I think one more note on the closing side would be Gary Yuko, who was a prominent researcher, like I said in the first slide about self-awareness, what he mentioned. So for emotional intelligence to be effective, it has to start with yourself. Self-awareness is the first building step towards it. You can't distill or enhance or other people's well-being, improvement, sense of self without first understanding how you operate on an emotional level. What distinguishes leaders is usually their level of emotional intelligence, and it is those skills which help to develop a more effective workplace. Now, has emotional intelligence made a difference in workplace? We have come across so many corporate sectors currently who are crazy about emotional intelligence, who want to learn about it, who want to understand that how can it make your workplace, a better place to work. Every day, we make emotionally charged decisions. We feel plan A is better than plan B, and we sometimes make choices based on our emotions and gut feelings. When we understand the origin and source of these emotions, especially when working in a team together, we are more attuned to each other. With globalization, emotional intelligence is more significant than ever when teams are cross cultural and global, increasing the complexity of interactions of emotions and how they are expressed. Essentially, emotional intelligence in the workplaces comes down to understanding, expressing, and managing good relationships and problem solving and working under pressure. So, all of these things can be well integrated into emotional intelligence, and hence it's extremely useful to have EI as part of your work culture. So I just close on that note. Thank you so much for having me here today, Axiata. And yeah, I'll hand it over back to Anton.
Thank you, Mansi. Well, Great to have you take us through the structured approach to emotional well-being, to the EQ part of it, in terms of what are the steps we can do and how individuals can sort of apply the various tools, I suppose, in order to make sure that there is a balance. But just, I guess the question I have, considering the industry that you're talking to today, and also considering the fact that we are kind of semi out of the whole COVID fiasco, we are kind of returning back to normalcy. When it comes to the responsibility of emotional well-being, right? And quite often we always say organization has got to do this, organization has got to do that. Mansi, in your experience, and I know you've kind of been around, you've done global work. Could you kind of elaborate as to where does the organizational responsibility of ensuring emotional well-being end, and kind of where does an employee's responsibility begin in this equation?
I think the organization and the employees, obviously, to run a proper structured and fully functional organization, the job role is from both sides, like you are well explaining, that an organization's responsibility is to make sure that the employees' well-being matters, that the mental health of their employees is good, so that they are productive. Now, that is where emotional intelligence steps in. That emotional intelligence builds emotional resilience, it helps in stress management, and hence the employee well-being can be well looked after. Now, the employee's responsibility towards the organization then would be that if the organization is looking after their mental wellness and their resilience in a certain way, then the employee's responsibility would be to make sure that they are productive. So, and in order to be productive, they can also use EI into their personal life. So what I've just given a glimpse into is all these things could be used, in corporate cultures as well as a part of a side effect, a good side effect. It will also be integrated into their personal lives. So when an organization understands that it has to look after its employees' well-being, the employees' responsibility would be to make sure that they are productive towards the organization. And that is how a well-oiled structure would run. Sorry, you are on mute, Anton.
Sorry, good point, and I do hear you loud and clear. Thank you for that, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more questions coming in that direction. In fact, I've got a question from someone from the audience. How does one take the first steps to get into a more healthy lifestyle if they are bogged down in stress and in bad practices? What would be the first steps to take, and any advice on that? I think it's a good question.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question because it's at least you have a starting point. You're asking about a starting point, that where can you start to change it, right? So I would say self-awareness. The first step in emotional intelligence as well is self-awareness. So you have to be aware about your own self. And in order to build that self-awareness, like I mentioned in the presentation as well, showed you various ways how you can support yourself in a better way. Because if you are not 100% yourself, obviously you cannot give out 100% to anybody else, whether it's your family, whether it's your corporate world, whether it's your bosses, etc. Because if you are at your 50%, there is only a certain percentage that you can give out. So self-awareness would be the first step where you can start that.
Thank you, Mansi. Right, so for those who've joined in now, we are in discussion with Mansi Jalokia, who is the CEO for Global Mental Health Association USA. She is the CEO for Indian Wellness Association and the advisor to mental health change in the UK. Feel free to throw in your questions via the chat option or WhatsApp your questions on 7722 66622. Mansi, thank you for clarifying that particular point. I mean, I did notice you had a slide completely dedicated to things that individuals can do in order to well-being. Can you kind of elaborate on that in terms of quick wins or quick things that individuals can do as part of their responsibility in contributing towards this well-being piece?
I think the quick things that you can do, sleep well, exercise, look after your food, look after your routines, the basic things. In all this shiny world and in all these everyday new things coming out, etc., in the world, we forget about the basic things, the basic routines, and the basic lifestyles that we need to follow in order to look after our mental well-being and peace. So, like I was saying, if you want to be 100% productive, you have to make sure that you are having your breaks in between when you're working. You are having a pause in your lives when it's needed to reflect upon. You are exercising every day, even if it is 10 minutes. Have discipline in your lives. I think discipline is a major factor which will help you build yourself in a better way. And I think once you are built in a better way, you will become a better person, and in turn that will help you in every ways, in your personal life, in your corporate life, everywhere. So I think that is where you begin.
Mansi, I mean, agreed. I think you're absolutely right. And I think the whole discipline piece is important. And quite often we are guilty of not sticking to that. But I'm going to sort of dive in a little bit more because I know even before COVID, you've been, championing this course on emotional well-being, right?
Yeah.
And it is not unique just to us. I think this is a situation across the globe where
Yeah.
I understand that I need to put aside a few minutes, but that's easier said than done. And I used to work for the BPO industry, so I do understand the pressures of the IT BPO world is quite unique in that
Right.
when we start, although we keep telling ourselves we're going to get up and put aside work now and get on to doing this little walk, little stretch,
Yeah.
it really never happens. We say, okay, we'll do it tomorrow. Okay, I missed it tomorrow, so I'll definitely get onto it starting Monday, and that Monday never comes. What advice would you have in that kind of situation? Have you seen something similar to that?
I myself have experienced it, Anton. So forget about seeing anything similar to around me. I mean, it's very hard for me as well to, stick to a certain kind of disciplined routine. I forget to have my water in the day. I forget to sometimes, pause in between at all. I forget to. There have been times when I've skipped meals as well during the day because it's meeting after meeting. It's conference after conference. So I get where you come from, definitely. But the answer again to all of that is routine and discipline. I mean, if you and I, we both know that okay, we begin at 9 and then we don't know how our day is going to be like, how hard it is, or back to back meetings or whatever, then we make sure that before 9 we do 15 minutes of mindfulness, we do 10 minutes of meditation, we at least have our breakfast and then sit down to work. I think it all comes back down to having a routine and a discipline. I mean, if you deliberately make an effort towards something, if you're committed towards it, I mean, how much are we committed to our corporate lives and to our office cultures? We are, aren't we? I mean, if you have a meeting, if I have a meeting, we'll just sit down in front of the laptop, isn't it? Look at the time, we'll sit down and we'll just do it. But so why aren't we that much committed to our own personal selves or bodies or minds? Because we it's just about prioritizing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying that work doesn't take a priority. Of course, it is a priority for so many of us around the world. But along with that, if we don't look after ourselves, we have to remember that there will come a time in life when our mental states will suddenly, we will be burdened, we'll be bogged down, we won't be able to perform well, it will affect our productivity. And all those factors, when they start building in, it'll be difficult for us to cope at that time. So I think that is something that we need to keep in the back of our minds, that if we want to be productive, if we want to just keep doing this what we are doing, we just have to pause. There is no option. I set alarms in my phones to drink water during the day because I forget it. I set my food alarms. I have a whiteboard in my office space where I work. So I have a big whiteboard, and on there I've written the time down that 1:30 is my lunch. So at least whenever I'm seeing around in the house somewhere, I can see it. And I know that, okay, it has gone past my time. So little things, whatever works for, everybody according to what is useful to them. I mean, keep a pack of dry fruits at your desk, that at least you keep eating something, even if you're running late. So all these little things, I think every little thing that you do for yourself is affecting your mental well-being. So just keep that in mind, and I think that will help.
Well, brilliant. Thank you for that. I'm going to sort of move from that point, and I think that's valid, to something that you had mentioned earlier on, which is practicing empathy and the importance of empathy in this whole emotional well-being space. And I guess it's a quality that is required both from the organizational perspective, as in senior leadership, and the employee's perspective.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you something, but I also noticed a question from someone in there saying, how would you practice empathy in a more distant relationship as we work from home, especially if you are new to the organization? And this is also pretty practical to Axiata, because even during COVID, I did notice that they were recruiting. They didn't stop their service to their customers, and they were extremely focused in that. And they were also sort of focused on creating job opportunities and ensuring their employees are looked out. But having said that, that question becomes very practical, which is, empathy, and A, it is difficult to put into practice, but B, when your team members are only virtual and you don't have the luxury of face-to-face, that little water cooler conversation or the coffee machine conversations, none of these happen. How does one display or demonstrate empathy?
So 4 ways I can think of how you can show, empathy in your workplace. And yes, the COVID situation, like you said, has made it a bit difficult because there is no person-to-person connection. So, when you talk to your colleagues, when you speak on the phone, or even after a meeting, just have a 5-minute chat. Like when you finish a meeting, and then after that, just have a 5-minute quick catch up or chat with everybody. How are you doing? How is it going, etc. Before the meeting, after the meeting. So, and when you talk to people, this is for leaders, especially managers, senior leaders, watch for signs of overwork in your people, in your team. Watch for those signs that, if you see that somebody is really tired, overly stressed, watch out for those signs, and just have one-to-one interaction that, are you okay? What's going on, etc. That is one way which you can, communicate. Because work burnout is also a real problem, and that causes a lot of problems both sides. Productivity again reduces, and people are at greater risk, health wise as well. Second thing would be to show sincere interest in, needs, hopes, dreams of people. So for example, I mean, currently it's especially needed because the pandemic has, put a full stop on a lot of things. People would have imagined, okay, getting promotions, getting hikes. People would have imagined that they would be, learning something new in the next year, doing so much better. I mean, there would be a lot of hopes which have been crushed because of the pandemic, and that affects the, employees' well-being as well. So, as an empathetic leader, you can, have a conversation about that and see that, if is there any possibilities that where you can work around those things, because at least then you will have addressed those needs and hopes, and a person would feel that, you are thinking about them. Third thing would be to demonstrate willingness to help an employee with personal problems. I think that this entire work from home situation has created quite a havoc in so many ways, because you are constantly surrounded by your families. You are not in your just working space. I mean, when you used to go to an office and sit there, you would just be focused on your work. You would have your workspace. But when you're sitting at home and you've created your workspace, there are so many things which affect you. So empathetic managers would understand that their team members, they're dynamic individuals, but they would also have, some personal issues going on. So just be forefront there to recognize it and support them. And lastly, show compassion when other people, disclose a personal loss. Unfortunately, pandemic has brought, such a thing upon us that we don't know what personally an individual is going through. So have that compassion, in your hearts. Real connections and friendships at work, they matter. Empathetic leadership is a tool that managers can, use to establish bonds with those they are privileged to lead. So yeah, that would be the last thing.
I mean, interesting, because you did mention family earlier on and the factors that come in, and that kind of brings me into another question. I did see, let me get one out of the way, and I've got somebody who's asked me a question: how do we deal with disturbing information coming in? I don't have anything more specific, but I am guessing that we are, well, when we did handle the first lockdown, the numbers were decent, they were all right, it didn't look alarming,
Yeah.
nothing too much to worry about. But when we did face the second lockdown, the numbers have been pretty bad since then. So on a daily basis, you do get varying information, and you're talking hundreds now as opposed to the tens and 15s in the past. Now we're looking at 300, 400 cases a day, so on and so forth. But when you have such news, or when you get news where you realize that someone who was at your office or who did come by the office premises, someone has been tested positive, it does send a bit of a shockwave. How does someone deal with that kind of disturbing information?
See, as I think as human beings, it's very obvious that all this disturbing news is going to bring a lot of anxiety into us, and we would go through that spells or phases where we would feel scared, or we would feel just not good about it, etc. So I think, again, to divert your mind into positivity or positive direction, one thing that immensely helps, again, a skill of emotional intelligence, is gratitude. So if you focus on being thankful in, things that you have around you or how your life has been, I think gratitude plays a very important role in reducing that anxiety that is coming from external factors around you. So that is one thing that I would say. Sorry, yeah.
I'm going to circle back to that in a bit. But I've got a string of questions, and I think more or less all of this is around the area of working from home, or WFH. And I think there are a couple of them, whereas employees are in a chaotic daily routine when working from home, with no proper time to have meals, ad hoc phone calls, overlapping multiple meetings, etc. Now, all of this adds stress to an employee who's working from home. What guidelines and tips can you provide to ADL, or Axiata Digital Labs, employees to organize themselves better? And I'm going to sort of bundle that with somebody else who's asked, is home office location, can it affect your emotional well-being? Thoughts?
Yes, home office locations definitely affects your emotional well-being, because you don't know how to define or how to put a line or how to have boundaries in between your personal life and your professional life. That is the reason that why these work from home situations have become so erratic and have become, so much of a concern. Although yes, that if you were traveling for work, and if you're living in a city, there are so many things that it has brought a convenience into lifestyle as well, that you can wake up in your bed, and you can just put a shirt on and sit for a meeting, and that's it. So that's the convenience that it has brought. But along with that, it has brought all these other things that you don't know how to draw a line. And I think that is where your first question, Anton, which you were talking about, it lies there, that how to cope with, work from home situations. And like I have given tips in my presentation as well. A lot of tips of, what you can do, how you can cope working from home, how you can cope with the stress basically surrounding you. See, because the stress right now is not just about corporate cultures, or not just about meeting deadlines, or, the actual stress is about your health, because you're scared, because, you don't know that how whether the vaccines are going to roll out, when are you going to get one? And these are all real questions of real world that everybody, has a question in their heart and minds today. And that is affecting your well-being. So the earlier question, when you are anxious, when you're feeling, overwhelmed, I had showed in my slide as well how to 12 ways to, support yourself. The diagrams are there as well. So similarly, one thing that really helps me is, slow breathing exercises. Breathing exercises, focusing on your breath, will actually calm your mind and your heart both down. So that is something that, you can start working on, research about it, and, do it a little bit at a time. Like start with 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then see how it is calming you down, because that is something you can do anywhere at any time. So those kind of tips really help.
Okay. I am mindful of time, so we're down to the last 10 minutes, and I'm just going to have the next couple of questions. So I'll probably take the next three. There's one here that says, for an employee to stick to a routine, the organization must also stick to a routine. And this is coming from unscheduled meetings or meetings that exceed the 9 to 6 or 8 to 5 time frames, which kind of puts, I suppose, added pressure on an employee, who's working from home. How do you handle that, or what advice would you give in that regard, from both an employer perspective and also an employee perspective?
I think employee perspective, firstly, boundaries. You don't have to be a yes man in any job role that you do. You only do how much you can do. And I think first of all, self-awareness, the first topic we touched upon on emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Be aware of how much can you do. Be aware of how much can you give. And if you cannot give, you put it on to next day. So if you can only talk for 6 to 7 hours and you're doing back-to-back meetings, then obviously, there has to be a cap on it. You cannot be constantly doing 10 meetings in a day. So that is where, I would have a conversation with my manager or with, whoever I'm dealing with, that this is how much I can do. And I think, again, it comes down to productivity. I mean, if your mind, if you're only 50% productive at the end of the day, what is the point in having those 2 extra meetings that, you're not going to be productive at? So that is a question where, which the organization should think about. Now, this coming back to the organization. So when you are expecting a lot out of your employees, be mindful of the fact that how much, productive they are. If they are productive, for 5 hours in a day, you take those 5 hours from them and, let them do their bit. But after a certain while, the productivity is going to stop. So how much actually are you gaining from that anyway? So I think it works both ways.
Okay, interesting. I have another question that just came in. How effective, in your opinion, is online counseling? Because in the Asian context, it's not really up there like the European or the US market, and you would know this, right? But how would someone encourage counseling as a response to stress and wellness?
Counseling actually helps a lot in stress and wellness. Things that, maybe you cannot talk about at home or you cannot talk about at work. Maybe it's easier for you to talk about it to a professional, because stress comes from buildup of all the emotions. And if the emotions are just piled up in your mind and heart and you cannot get rid of them, then that is where counseling actually steps in. Online counseling is effective. I mean, provided you find a good counselor. Good counselor is hard to find. But once you build that rapport with the counselor, it definitely helps. And the main reason is, because it's hard in Asian cultures, it's hard for us to talk to our colleagues, wife or husband, partners, parents, and etc. So sometimes it's just easier for us to talk to a stranger because they don't know us, they're not going to judge us. And unfortunately, in our cultures, we are very scared of being judged at. So that is the reason that, we let emotions build up in our head. And that is where a counselor can really help.
All right. I'm just going to bring it around to the last question that I have. And I just, because I think now we are more and more, I think organizations are looking at a more hybrid approach to working. So we did test out the working from home on and off, and I think now quite a number of organizations have kind of figured the art of the hybrid situation, right? But just to put the whole emotional well-being into a broader context, there is this thing that we talk about, which is interdependencies, right? So there is you, the triangle, there is the organization, and then there is the whole, your family, your friends, your close circle, or your network, right? My question is, yeah, we did approach what the organization should be doing. We did kind of talk about what the individual must be doing, but how can others, or how can those who fall into that, the third piece of that puzzle, either support or make it worse in terms of emotional well-being, so that we are kind of aware of what to avoid or what to expect?
So if you can elaborate a little bit on what this third side is. So we have talked about the employees' well-being and how the employees can support. We have talked about the organizational side, that how they should support their employees. So what is the third part that you're exactly talking about?
So the third part would be, the family members, because if you're working from home, you've got your family around you, you've got your extended family around you, you've got your relations,
Right.
You've also got your close circuit of friends around you. Now, they all kind of play an influence of some sort. But how does that sort of come into this equation? Because this is still on the employee at the end of the day.
I think empathy would be the key word here. I mean, empathetic understanding, of each other helps a lot. So, for example, if you talk about families, if the families are seeing that how much, pressure the person is under, they are, how many things they have to cope with in their lives, etc. Empathy is something that, plays a major role in all of these three aspects, for employee, for the organization, as well as for the third aspect. If people build that empathy, into their hearts and minds, they will be able to understand each other a lot better. And I think that goes for the employees as well, the ones who are right there in the middle, because it's like they are here in the middle, and then they're surrounded by all these other sources and all these other factors which are affecting them all the time. So families, organization, work pressure, etc. So yeah, I think an empathetic understanding would play a major role there. That is the reason why we need to raise, emotional intelligent societies, emotional intelligent people, so that they can understand each other's emotions in a much better way.
Fair. And can I just throw in one last question that's coming from the audience? Any tips to avoid isolation fatigue while balancing the demands of remote working? I know you kind of covered and you touched on it a little bit earlier on, but just maybe to summarize for the benefit of this audience member.
Yeah, sure. So say the question again. Few tips to...
Any tips to avoid isolation fatigue while balancing the demands of remote working?
Balancing the demands of remote working. Two things. One thing I would say, in the evenings, please make sure, go out for a walk. Just does not matter what time of the day it is, even if it is a night walk, because it will take you outside from that, work culture and home culture and everything that you're surrounded with the entire day, it is important for your mind to, have that pause. And that pause will happen in that silence, where you will just get out of that situation that you are in all day anyway. Secondly, keep in touch with, friends, family, etc. I mean, yes, we have not been able to see our friends for such a long time, and that affects our well-being a lot as well, because earlier on, even if I talk about personally myself, I used to go out for a coffee with my best friend. We used to sit, have a chat, talk about, our lives, what's going on, etc. And we have not been able to do that for a very long time. And that has affected a lot of us. The only alternative is that, sit on a phone call, have a long phone call with somebody, that you are comfortable with. Talk about all the things that are there in your head. I think communication is the key. So keep the communication going, keep those lines open, and you'll feel much better. Reading is another thing that, painting, reading, have a skill, or have a hobby that, helps you take your mind off of things, whether it's from your personal lives, whether it's from your professional lives. Do something in a day, like even if it is for 15-20 minutes, but do something like that in a day which actually engages you, into it. That helps a lot too.
All right, Mansi, thank you. And I'm mindful of the time. We have unfortunately come to the end of this discussion. So we are grateful that you've given us an hour of your time.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you everyone who've joined in, who've stayed around to listen to this conversation, this enlightening information organized by Axiata Digital Labs. Thank you for initiating this wonderful session on a prevalent and pressing topic. Mansi, thank you once again for sharing your views, knowledge, and that insight. I know your expertise comes in from being around the globe, and this certainly helped us. On that note, to everyone who's joined us, have a wonderful evening and a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.